Complicated dude. He's doing all these things in war. He's killing other people. Other people are trying to kill him. He's destroying democracies. He then risks his reputation to defend democracy in the United States. My name is Jonathan M. Katz. I am the author of Gangsters of Capitalism, Smedly, Butler, the Marines, and the Making and Breaking of America's Empire.
Smedly Butler was one of the most decorated Marines of the 20th century. Understanding his life and deeds may help us better understand America's complicated place in the world.
An American flag is burned at the height of the demonstration. A new low in public protest, added strain on Spanish-American relations.
Butler was born in 1881 to a wealthy Quaker family near Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
In 1898, he lied about his age and joined the Marine Corps at the age of 16 to fight in Cuba in what's often known as the Spanish-American War against the Spanish Empire. And from there, he participated in basically every U.S. invasion, occupation, overseas war, including many that Americans had never heard of, from 1898 until the 1930s. And then for the last 10 years of his life, in the 1930s, he became an anti-war, anti-imperialist activist who, among other things, blew the whistle on a fascist coup to overthrow President Franklin Delano Roosevelt in 1934. The wars that Butler fought in are wars that most Americans have never heard of. They're wars like the Philippine-American War, when the United States colonized the islands of the Philippines. The U.S. invasions and occupations of Nicaragua, Honduras, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, the U.S. conquest of Puerto Rico, the U.S. invasion of Mexico in 1914. Butler participated in not one, but two invasions of China, first in 1900 in response to what is known as the Boxer Rebellion, and the second was in the 1920s during essentially a kind of an internal civil war that then becomes what is known by historians as the Chinese Civil War between the communists and the nationalists in the late 1920s.
Why aren't these conflicts better known in the States?
I think the reason why Americans, for the most part, have never heard of these wars is because they have been actively forgotten. They're wars that Americans aren't proud of. They're wars in which we did bad things for bad reasons. We were not going to spread democracy. We were not going to liberate peoples elsewhere. We were going to exploit and rob. And Smedley Butler realized that to a certain extent as it was happening, and then to a larger extent after he retired in the 1930s.
Butler retired holding the rank of Major General.
He became really, really famous and really, really popular for the things that he did in the Marines.
Butler even consulted with Hollywood on an MGM film called Tell It to the Marines. It starred actor Lon Chaney, one of the famous screen legends of his time.
In Tell It to the Marines, he plays essentially Smedley Butler. He mimics Smedley Butler's mannerisms.
But for all his successes, Butler grew disillusioned with the work of the Marines and the U.S.
Major General Smedley Butler, retired of the U.S. Marine Corps.
In the 1930s, Butler undergoes something of a change.
I never saw such discipline. I never saw such fine Americanism as is exhibited by you people.
It actually starts in 1931 when he's court-martialed for insulting the fascist dictator Benito Mussolini. And then in 1934, he blows the whistle on the business plot, a fascist coup to overthrow President Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
My main interest in all this is to preserve our democratic institutions. I want to retain the right to vote. I have the right to speak freely and the right to write.
He takes a little bit more of a radical turn. In 1935, he writes a book called War is a Racket. He's talking about the collusion between essentially the U.S. government, the U.S. military, and big business. He says, looking back on it, I was a muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and the banks. I was a racketeer for capitalism.
It was a striking admission for a war hero to make.
The fact that he then has this burst of insight and then, spends years really taking himself to task, kind of wearing the hair shirt.
as an honor, a privilege to come in and be with you.
That makes him a really, really fascinating and really unique character in American history and really in world history.
Smedley Butler died at the age of 58 at the start of World War II. His warnings to the U.S. are still worth considering.
What he's anticipating is given a catchier name about 2 decades later by President Dwight Eisenhower, another general, who dubs it the military-industrial complex. Basically, that you've got the military, you've got industry, and that they are together in a complex where they are sort of working together to advance one another's interests and involve us in wars to essentially make money for a small group.
We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes.
Katz says this comes at a cost.
The history of these wars, the things that Smedley Butler and his generation of Marines did, isn't remembered in the United States for the most part, but it is very much remembered in other places overseas. It continues to explain our relationship with Haiti. It helps explain our relationship with Mexico. It helps explain our relationship with Nicaragua. It helps explain our relationship with Puerto Rico. Why do Puerto Ricans feel like they're a colony? Why do a lot of Puerto Ricans feel like they're a colony of the United States? Because they are, because they remember the things that Smedley Butler and the Marines did. The things that we do abroad have a way of coming back home. There is this process of brutalization of ourselves, that we become more brutal as we close our eyes to the things that are done in our name. And as we don't hold our own people and ourselves accountable for the things that we do in places like Central America, the things that we do in places like Afghanistan and Iraq, those then have a way of coming back and rebounding on us and being used as justification for violence and authoritarianism at home.
This is Inside Edition Digital.
Thanks for watching that.